Well, hello again, friends. This is Community Tribe, and welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast. This podcast exists to help advisors like you increase your profitability and the quality of life, not just for yourself, but also for those that you serve. Wes, when you introduced the topic of our podcast last time, you kind of made it a mystery, set it up with this story that I think a lot of people find fascinating, the layers behind why some companies have a very difficult time innovating and push back against it. And you made this connection to these applicable truths about in our own lives, professionally and personally, it can be our nature to resist innovation. So we're going to keep going with that thread. And really today we're going to be really actionable and focused on what do people need to do next, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So for those of you who weren't on last time, go re-listen because that's a really fun, dive into this topic that we're going to be, in the series and in the specifics of it. But last time, what we talked about is the very famous story of Blockbuster Video and Netflix. And you've probably seen, Blockbuster Video had the ability to buy Netflix back in 2000 for $50 million. Now, the key things to remember are Blockbuster was worth $6 billion in 2000. So 50 million, well, it's a lot of money, was less than 1% of their market capitalization at the time. And they basically laughed at them and said, hey, we're going to keep moving forward with in-store sales. We think the internet might be overblown. If it is, we'll figure it out at the time. We don't need you. And they had a reasonable track record. They kind of proof of concept, the idea. But in any event, they passed. And the founders of Netflix would say it was the worst day and then later the greatest day of their lives that Netflix passed because in 2010, Blockbuster declared bankruptcy. And in 2010, Netflix was worth $9.3 billion. And in 2019, there was one store left of Blockbuster and it's in Bend, Oregon. And today, Netflix is worth just shy of $2 billion. And has radically transformed and changed the marketplace many, many times, which we could do our own podcast on just Netflix. But here's the thing is the tragedy of Blockbuster and the opportunity of Netflix, right? The tragedy is that Blockbuster was beautifully prepared for a world that no longer existed. And there are truths in this narrative of Blockbuster and Netflix that not only help advisors avoid being obsolete, but actually transform the marketplace for them. It's the innovation side instead of the stagnation that can occur if you're in the right mindset. And you saw two companies that radically embodied both. And it wasn't because they didn't have smart people on both sides. That's the tragedy to me. It's because one of them failed to embrace the things that are necessary to move into the future and defended their past. And so we talked a lot about one aspect of that last week. This week, I want to take it in a different direction. And it's one of my favorite quotes of all time. And then I want us kind of talk about this for a little bit. But the takeaway, the big idea here is direction, not intention, determines destination by Andy Stanley.
Direction, not intention?
Direction, not intention, determines destination.
So tell me about the difference between direction and intention, because I was thinking, my family is going to go to South Dakota to visit the cousins and in-laws and such. And it's sort of like, I know the direction I need to go. Does direction mean like movement? Intention just sort of means emotion?
Yeah. So similar. If you're in probably the greatest state in the United States, which is Texas. If you're in Texas, like we are, and not you, Andy, but you can come visit us anytime you want.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to go to Nashville to come see you. And I have all the intention in the world. You and I talk about it. We can pray traveling mercies over the journey.
Absolutely.
We can like look at a map and think about, man, here's actually what needs to be done to do that.
Yeah.
And then if Justin and I get in the car and we drive south, we're going to end up in Galveston, not Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
So intention, while it's very good, and most people have really good intentions, intentions are not enough. Intentions are a requirement, but it's direction that determines your destination, where you'll ultimately end up, far more than all the things we pontificate about and talk about.
Mm-hmm. I find it interesting too to consider like how much energy is spent on intention, how much time is spent on intention versus direction.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm not just preaching. If I am, I'm preaching to myself in front of a mirror. Like, this is a reality we all have to struggle with. But I find that those who succeed are comfortable with spending more of the energy on direction. Some on intention. You have to make a plan, but they're willing to take action and then adjust accordingly. While, I'm thinking about this, I have a meeting set with someone that I essentially canceled because I said, in a very kind way, I responded, "We've already talked about this, and you didn't do it. So is there something new that you wanted to discuss?"
Yeah.
And their answer was no. And I'd say, well, okay, well then, if there's something new you would like to discuss sometime, then we can do that. But we've already discussed this and you made your decision, and, that's fine. You can make that decision. But intentions intentions take up a lot of time and get you nowhere.
Yeah.
If you're not careful.
Well, and this is so many applications. Just going back to Blockbuster and Netflix, both had intentions of being very successful organizations. That was, nobody was like, "Hey, we were setting out to file bankruptcy." But the problem was, and they both pontificated, and to do that, we've got to be innovators. We've got to change how we do things. But the direction of change, one of them was going in reverse or sideways, and the other one was going forward. And this is honestly one of those things I see. I see at all levels, Andy. But I mean, the large corporations are probably, just because there's a lot of layers and bureaucracy sometimes that gets built in.
Yeah.
It's very difficult because everybody agrees change should happen. We very much disagree on what that change should be sometimes. And oftentimes people get hired into jobs that, if too much innovation and change happens, that job they were hired to do is no longer there. And so many times organizational structures can work against you actually moving in the kind of direction that ultimately is going to produce the outcome, the destination that you want most.
So, I mean, the other part of this is that it's fascinating to me when people are so resistant to change when they have room, cash, space, time. It's interesting to me that sometimes the things that become larger become so risk averse. And yet the reality is they could, if the Netflix investment went to zero, Blockbuster would still be fine.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So it's interesting that there are bets that we don't, and by bet, I mean risks or something new.
Yeah.
It's like, but what is the worst case scenario? And it's like, it's not that bad. Right? What's the best case scenario? Amazing. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Right?
What a lot of times the risk that's not assessed is, what's the risk of not doing this? What's the risk of not trying it on? And I think that's the tricky part here. Andy, you said this on the last podcast. I thought was brilliant, and I'll repeat it. But it's, if you had a child in 2000 and you worked for Blockbuster Video, my father did have one. It was me, and now I was grown by then, so I was out of the house. So, but if you had a young child by that point, and you said, "Hey, in 10 years," so your child is 8 right now. They'll be 18 in 2010. And by the way, your company's going to be bankrupt and out of job. About the time your child needs to go to college, by the way, just putting that out. But
right. Yeah.
But here's the other thing I would layer into that is, sometimes the organizational structure, it is so resistant to the kinds of change that are necessary. Because here's the thing. And I think Aniako, who was the Blockbuster CEO at the time, I think he did a lot of good things. I mean, he had a great track record coming in, but the fact remains that he got richer from 2000 to 2007 when he was fired, finally.
Really?
Not more. And so sometimes everybody's getting paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And man, it's easier for us to protect what we've done and then risk maybe what if this change eliminates my role or confuses it. So there's a lot there.
Innovation is not always the I mean, people talk about it like it's this guarantee, and it's Netflix is, they spent literally billions of dollars on original programming, and it's a mixed bag. Amazon, same thing. They're cutting way back on their original programming budgets. But to do original programming, because it used to be just, we'll just play other people's movies, and they're like, what if we played our own movies? The other thing is innovation is not a guarantee, right? It's not
right.
This will work, right? I mean, Tesla still has lots of problems because they innovate. SpaceX has a lot of problems because they innovate, right? When your rocket blows up, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Especially when it's supposed to take people somewhere, right? But you have to have the stomach for it, and also understand that if you want to make progress, then you have to be okay with the resistance. Yeah. I think the challenge is that for those who are listening, it's that our human nature is bent towards, that's new, bad.
Yeah.
This is hard, run.
Right. And I think that's where, if I think about takeaways, like from some of this stuff, you've really got to beware of any kind of organizational structure that you see would want a position. If you don't have the right, culture, they may do everything they can to resist change because they're worried about their position going away. And so, and that's less in smaller organizations. But here's the thing. Every advisor on this call, or every advisor in here, we interact with a bunch of large organizations as a result of the work we do. And so you have to think about that as, we have choices out there when we're dating this dance as to, what am I really having a conversation where they have great intention, but they just don't have the capacity to carry out the direction, or desire to carry out the direction, and we just are not a good fit, and that's okay. They don't. We're not all right. So I think what you got to do is think about that. Here's the other one, and this is my dad really. This is one lesson I learned from my father in the Blockbuster days. Is you should beware of an organizational structure that plays telephone.
Because what is happening, or what does that tell you about an organization if the way that they make decisions is, let me call so and so who's going to call so and who's going to call so and so?
Yeah.
What is why is that a sign of unhealthy culture?
The game, for those of you who've never played it, I can't imagine you did, and maybe times have changed enough to where there's a whole generation that haven't. But the game telephone would be, you all sit in a big circle. There's a bunch of people. And I say something to the person next to me, then they say something to the person next to them, and you're supposed to whisper it, so you can't really hear it. And it goes all the way around the room. By the time it gets to the end, it's completely different than what the original person said. Not even close, because they're when the more layers you have to someone that ultimately can make the decision, there's a problem. So my, there's generally Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown. And he has a great statement in one of the podcasts he's on that I heard recently. He said, great ideas have no rank. Great ideas have no rank. The way to cut through bureaucracy and lean into innovation is with a crisis before the actual one shows up at your door. And I'm going to tell you, through that whole period, they didn't really know that Iniaco met with Netflix and told them no. But my dad was on the board for the franchisees that would go to corporate and talk to him about, here's all the things we're seeing, all the issues. And frequently was brought up, there's this company, Netflix. Well, they didn't know we know. We know there's this company, Netflix, but Iniaco already told him no. So we're not going to go talk to him about it again. And if we do, we'll take that in consideration. We're also working on our own online, those kind of things. But the stores are the bedrock of what we're doing, and so it was telephone. You could never get a direct conversation.
I was part of, I'm part of a Facebook group that's 90s culture stuff, which is just always amazing to me. And I was thinking about you guys the other day because it was, what a video store looked like in the 90s, or whatever. And actually one of the things I saw was that they had rolled out their idea at Innovation was this Blockbuster Unlimited card. And so it went from, $4 to rent a movie to, you pay $20 and you can rent as many as you want. Right. But the problem was their idea of innovation was do more of what's not working.
Yeah.
People are coming to our store less because they can get their movies through the internet. So let's have them come to our store more.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that makes sense, but like not if people just want to stay home, right?
The one fundamental here, and I hope everybody hear what I'm about to say. If you checked out or check back in with me for a second, because it's critical in what you just said. Transformation trumps transaction. Most of the time when people say, hey, we have intentions of innovation, we need change, their change is how do we do more of what we're already doing faster and louder? And oftentimes you're turning up the volume on something no one wants to hear anymore. You've got to set back and you've got to say, how can we transform this to where it's something people want to hear now? It's a different song we're playing. It's not beating the same drum that we've always beat. And I believe that's a fundamental difference. I believe in advisors. If you're an advisor and and all of us go through this in the beginning, you come in and, you try and do as many transactions as you possibly can, working as hard as you can. Eventually you hit a ceiling of complexity that you just can't run any faster. You can't work any harder. So you need to transform the DNA of your organization to be a different kind of company where you've got different people that are working with you now and you can focus on doing different things. You need to be a better, different offer. And that's what we train to in the Transform Learning Series or all our courses that we have online. It's all about not just how to do more of what you're doing faster. That in the long term is not going to work, right? How do you transform what you're doing so it's far more attractive than everybody wants it?
So transformation trumps transaction. And the difference being transaction is just, it's not memorable. It's not a good story, right? It's, like you don't want to build a relationship with someone you have just a transaction with.
Yeah.
Right. But if someone's a part of a transformation, that's, more long lasting.
Yeah.
Right? It's easier to talk about.
And to put it back to the video store example, think about like the things that they would throw out. It was designed to say, hey, we know less people are coming to the video store and you're buying movies. You're engaging in home entertainment a different way. You're allowing movies to be sent to you at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. Well, instead of transforming to something that offers a in-home experience, they said, no late fees. We're louder. Like, the video store is still here. Now you don't have late fees, or you can come buy a shirt now that is in here. We got swag
with our name on it.
Yeah. With our name on it. It's like, so don't just turn up the volume on what you're doing. At some point you got to stop and you got to transform. That's why in that book, I mentioned it last time we were on the podcast, 10X is easier than 2X, which I highly recommend, by the way. One of the things they talk about is the reason 10X is often easier than 2X is 2X doesn't require a lot of transformation. It just requires more transaction. I'll just run a little faster. I'll just do more of what I'm already doing more. And what does that do? That just taxes all your existing resources, gives you less margin for creativity and innovation. Whereas if you're trying to go 10X, you can't do it just going faster. You've got to reinvent your approach to what you're doing. You got to get rid of 80% of what you're doing and embrace the 20% that's next level and add new things in. You become a different offer.
So I want to ask this question then, to bring all these ideas together. If someone's hearing this and they say, guys, I want what you're talking about. I want to have a different kind of business. I want, there are people in this business that make 80,000 and there's people who make 800,000. That's 10X for all those math nerds out there, right? So yeah. What do people need to start to do with intention, to start to have more of a 10X kind of thinking, to start to get out of intention and into transformation?
Yeah. So you got to remove any organizational barriers, even if you're an organization of one, to testing new ideas. And your organizational barriers could be the fact that you just don't have a very good calendar. Like you are, there is no rhythm. There is no blocking. It is whatever the tallest spire is, you put that one out. You have to have space for change in your life. And so innovation requires time and it requires being blended into the rhythm of your normal, the things that are already autopilot that are working.
Interesting.
To go to, and I believe this, you gotta pay attention to the early adopters out there. Who are the people that are on the fringes that people think right now are crazy, that are like, that'll never work. You know what, Andy, I remember before COVID, and we went to a completely remote office, like all of our meetings, all of our team. We have team members all across the country. And I go talk about it at meetings, and people looked at me like I had three eyes. They were like, what? That could never work. And here's why. And turns out all of them were able to do it. And the world changed. But who's breaking the rules out there? And I don't mean compliance rules. I'm talking about like who is doing it a different way, and just pay attention. Are there barriers organizationally, whether it's your organizations you're a part of, that are preventing you in the way you do business from really the possibilities of change that need to happen in order for you to reach that 10x future. And don't be afraid to test stuff. Just don't be afraid to test stuff. You're going to have to try stuff on, and that only happens if you have a regular diet of it.
Love it. So what I'm hearing from that is, it starts with intention, but it really ends with scheduling time and making time for it. Every action requires a time to do the action end. And so it's really just creating time to do that, to get out of the ruts that we create for ourselves. So I appreciate the, practical advice there. And I hope that people will open their calendar right now and create space for that. And my encouragement to you is to use a function on your calendar called repeat, which is you can just hit it. I'm going to do this every week at this time. Because right now you're repeating things and they're not getting you where you want to go. So try repeating something else and see where that gets you. So as always, thanks for your time, Wes.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Justin.